hard times of growing up. So that is
Good
about me.
stuff.
And here we are, parenting upstream. So
Yeah,
thank you for having
visiting
us.
again. Let me jump in and share our PowerPoint real quick from beginning. And so you can see a lot of our time is taken up with young people. It's become more than a hobby of caring for individuals holistically, making sure their childhoods and their trajectory are really constructed for what we want them to get out of it. Like we're really excited at the prospect of creating adults who can function and are successful in whatever endeavors they wish to engage in as young adults, and that starts really, really early. And that's part of our conversations today, specifically about the transition to school and some of the things that we've seen over the years, and working with all of our partners in the community around the education system um, and how young people can thrive within that a little differently. COVID obviously had an impact, but a lot of times our systems are. I wouldn't say run contrary, but they aren't necessarily the most productive at creating the young person that we want. I remember I have a 20, soon to be 21-year old. Wow. But when my 21-year-old was little teeny tiny, we had a speaker here in Issaquah from Challenge Success come, and it was just this amazing presentation. And the presenter said something that has stuck with me to this day. She gave out 3x5 cards and she said, "What do you want your young person to be able to do as a young adult?" And she collected them afterwards, and none of them said anything about having like a 4.0 grade point average, right? Like all of these things were about kindness and empathy and compassion and just good people. And then we had a great conversation about why a lot of our systems run contrary to creating that. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is kind of thinking about those systems. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of reframing and thinking about the term resilience. Resilience has become one of those words that just exists in our community in so many different ways that it's lost its energy, it's lost its potency. Right, we've kind of utilized it in so many systems, but I want to encourage and have a conversation and think about resilience a little differently. We always talk about young people having to develop resilience, but we don't necessarily talk about what that might look like. And Marcelle and I laugh about this. I don't know where I was when this occurred. I might have been on a run or something, but I was like, you know what? We have that conversation a lot, but resilience really is predicated on adversity, right? Like
Mhm.
the idea of resilience in behavioral health and social emotional learning is a function of kind of thinking about adverse childhood experiences. Like it's a remedy to trauma and things that young people experience. And those obviously experiences are way down on the continuum. But for our young people to be developing a capacity to build resilient, they're going to have to face adversity in their trajectory as young people, right? So like if we young people can't face setbacks in their life if they're not exposed to setbacks in their life. Like things are supposed to be difficult, things are supposed to be challenging. That's a part of our development. And I'm so guilty of this as a parent, but we are of the generation of like we want our young people to have it better off than we did, right? We don't want them to run into difficulties and stuff like that. And unfortunately, a byproduct of that mindset was the creation of what researchers started to call helicopter parenting, right? Where parents were micromanaging systems that their child was in, right? Playdates, not that playdates are bad because we have to get kids from one place to another, but the idea that everything is micromanaged and systems are created and there's a level of hovering. Even in our school systems, recesses have started to been monitored and have curriculum rather than being like this open format to discover and play and run into adversity and then try to figure it out. And so what has occurred post helicopter parenting is a concept in the academic literature, and you hear it in conversations on social media, is the idea of snowplow parenting. And that's a circumstance where we're no longer hovering. What we're doing is putting ourselves in front of our young people and removing the adversity before it gets to them. And so what we're left with, unfortunately, is young people who don't experience those developmentally appropriate setbacks and then don't have the opportunity to figure out how to deal with them in a productive way. Which, again, when young people, if they're off to college after high school and they have not been exposed to those opportunities, wow, that's really ripe for unhealthy decisions about what that might look like, right? So as our young people are going into middle school, high school, elementary school, whatever it is, like what is the experience they can have that allows them to develop some of that grit and stamina? And Marcelle will talk about frustration tolerance in the learning process as we move along. So that's kind of a big concept that I want to think about, is that one, resilience is predicated on adversity. And that adversity doesn't mean something like, so my young person yesterday had their wisdom teeth taken out. When he had scheduled everything by himself and was just really independent, but it ended up being all four of them being removed. I thought it was only going to be two because he's not the best communicator. So, and like that is different, right? That's not like, that's just healthcare versus, hey, Dad, I left my shoes and we have gym today. It's like, I'm sorry that you left your shoes here. Let me know and we can talk about it when you get home, right? But not taking the steps to remedy that, right? I've noticed if you go to middle schools, there's tables outside, set up outside for parents to drop off all the things that young people have forgotten. It's like, how are we going to not remember to remember things if like there's this built-in mechanism for just making that easier? So thinking about, okay, what are those opportunities developmentally? The other thing to think about with the idea of resilience is how it creates self-confidence. And again, I was being a parent of an only child, I noted that I was consistently kind of trying to intervene in circumstances to make things easier. And what I had to learn is that the unfortunate reality in doing that is what I was portraying to my young person was that I didn't think that they could do it on their own. And we really want to develop young people who have the capacity and the confidence to be successful in their environment. So, how can we support that resilience building, right? Allowing them to do things on their own, right? If you want a good decision maker, you have to let them make decisions. They're not always going to be perfect, they're not always going to be good, but they certainly will be theirs. And there's an opportunity for learning that comes with that, right? Oh, well, that was weird. So we've rised up snowplow parenting. So again, moving into adversity. And the other part of that resilience building, just from a high level standpoint, is their capacity to develop healthy coping strategies. One of the other things that I found fascinating with challenge success is when young people were put in these really highly academically structured schools and they had unbelievable amounts of responsibilities with regard to their achievements academically. What Challenge Success found is that 85% of them responded because they were so overwhelmed and concerned by participating in other unethical behaviors to be successful, right? And so thinking about how we can create environments where people can be exposed to coping strategies that are just going to allow them to manage difficulties, manage adversity, and then step in productive ways rather than responding in unhealthy or maladaptive strategies or patterns as they go. right? So that's one piece about thinking about resilience development. And Marcelle's going to talk a little bit about the idea of frustration tolerance and what comes with that and how we can help our young person.
All right. Well, thank you. That's such a great lead in for all kind of the pieces that we are going to talk about today. I do want to start out by saying that Jerry and I very much believe there's no one size fits all children, right? So we know that kids differ in their uniquenesses, their sensory needs, their communication, temperament, their attention,
Here,
right?
here.
Impulse control. Like we have to remember that we need to take what we're talking about tonight and understand it for our own children that we have. And I have two children and they're very different. So taking all of this in as a parent of more than one child, right? Or a grandparent, some caregiver, thinking about how these needs are met possibly differently for each of those children in your life. So that's also a really important piece just to kind of touch on here. Um, so as we think about this idea of like starting school, getting our kids and getting our youth like set and ready to go, these were kind of some of the top of mind things that I started thinking about, how can we ready them not just for school, but kind of like life in general, right? These are skills that we want to teach and skills that we need to teach in order for that longevity of these skills to be in their lives. So as Jerry's talking about helping to build that confidence, not pulling everything out of the way. One of the things that, is also really important is for our children to be able to really be able to take that frustration that they may have when they're trying new things or they feel like they can't do something and be someone who can walk with them rather than someone who is, as Jerry was talking about, like that snowplow parenting, like pushing things out of the way, right? So one thing that we can do, that our teachers do, and that the people in this world do is sometimes saying no is something that our kids are going to hear. And that can cause a frustration, right? So if I say to my kiddo no about something that he wants to do, right, I'm going to create some frustration around what it is he's asking. This not only can transfer in life at home, but it transfers to life at school and out in the community. So, kind of thinking about this space between I can't and I can. So, we'll talk a little bit about kind of what that looks like, but thinking about the space in between, that is frustration tolerance. Okay. All right. So, the next one we have here is emotional resilience. So, when we're thinking about what emotional resilience is, right? If I am having my kiddo come home and say, my teacher said that I can't turn my assignment in late, right? So the teacher's saying no. Well, there's going to be some frustration there, but I'm also teaching my kiddo in that moment, like problem solving skills, right? So they've been told no, and they're super frustrated and they want it to work the way they want it to work. And then we are working on some emotional resilience in this moment, right? So it is not the super upset meltdown response. And if it is, right, how do we get through that and move on to the other side where then we become flexible? We think about ways to problem solve without the parent in that moment coming in to come up with all of the reasons and all of the things or decide, I'm going to call your teacher because I'm going to now figure it out for you, right? So we want to think about, yes, if there's a danger or a situation that feels much bigger than the child at their age and developmental stage, yes, you get involved, right? But thinking about where your child is at, what their abilities and what their development is, can you let them, with you, problem solve the situation at hand? And the third one is about emotional regulation. So this is more about having a control over a situation or being able to cope with the situation. So even though my teacher told me I cannot turn that assignment in late, right? I'm going to figure out how to handle this. Either I'm going to have to take the zero or I'm going to have to talk with my teacher and explain. Maybe they want to hear why the assignment wasn't in, right? But coming into the situation with a regulated state, knowing that they can maybe try and have that discussion. So thinking about while no creates boundaries that oftentimes can frustrate our children, we want to be able to allow them to navigate, to find flexibility, to be the problem solver. And we walk with them, right? We're not just like, here you go and figure it out. This is about modeling, it's about explicit teaching, right? So when we're navigating those small challenges with them, we need to think about how these tools right now are going to help them navigate bigger problems or larger situations and events as their life moves forward. So we're teaching skills now that are going to be for life. So as school starts, again, these are things that are going to come up. And so how will you choose to walk with your children during those setbacks? Those setbacks are opportunity for growth, right? They're opportunity for them to persevere, problem solve, become adaptable human beings. So realizing how important that is during the time where they're feeling frustrated, they're very upset, and those feelings are totally fine. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll touch on emotions here in a bit, but also knowing that those emotion regulation strategies, and Jerry touched on this too, like we want our children to be able to have those strategies of coping without feeling like they have to control everything. They can't, right? That's not part of life. You don't get to control everything. You get to control yourself and how you respond or react to whatever is happening. But I can't control the event that happened. I can't control the situation or how anyone else is going to respond. So it's important for us to come up with, and I enjoy doing this with my kids and even creating lists of ways that they choose to regulate when their emotions are high, right? So it could be like an overly excited emotion, or it could be like really stressful or feelings of depression, right? Or feelings of grief. So how do we model that ourselves? And how do we talk with our kids about that? From a very young age, this is like very important that we're modeling it and we're saying out loud, maybe like, I'm feeling frustrated and I'm going to take some deep breaths. We don't want to see our kids go to, as Jerry pointed out, those unhealthy coping strategies when things are not going the way that they want them to be. So we're not only creating those boundaries, but we're also teaching them how to move through to get to the other side and move on.
I love this slide. Marcelle and I had an opportunity to talk to a dear friend and colleague, my wife, who's a 21-year Lake Washington School District teacher.
Yes.
And she consistently talks about the reduction in frustration tolerance that young people have. They're so used to instantaneous access to everything. And now with AI responses, they don't need to critically think. And so, yeah, I'm excited to hear about this.
Yeah. So, like I said before, frustration is actually this going from not knowing something to knowing. And there's a whole lot in between. And so I want you to start thinking about frustration being growth in action. Why? Because we are helping or watching or supporting as we see our kids move from the I can't to the I'm learning. And there's going to be maybe tears. I know that when I was working on math with my daughter for homework time, there were tears of frustration, right? But going from not knowing and trying to be supportive to her being able to know and understand this is how this is done, so that when she goes in to take the test or she goes in to do her work in class and explain it, she's able to do that. If
Right.
I am in there butting in while she's frustrated and like looking up answers and taking my like chat GPT and figuring it out for her, right? That is not helping her in any way. It's just showing her like, I'm going to quickly remove this opportunity for growth. I don't believe in you, even though we're not saying it. It's like saying like, I don't
That's
believe
it.
in you to get it. So I'm going to be here to just fix it. And we're just going to move on because I can't tolerate your frustration.
Mhm.
I want to be able to figure out how to keep myself calm when there is that frustration happening in my own kiddo, right? So I need my own coping strategies too, healthy coping strategies as at that. We don't need to get into the parent coping strategies, but it is important. Not only are you modeling them, but you're also needing them. So use them. So between this, like not knowing this learning, right? So think about this whole middle part of this beautiful picture we have represented here as the learning, right? So we are creating learning, we're creating belief in ourselves while we're going through this frustration, right? We're cultivating a mindset that we actually value, like the process of hard work. Um, I taught kindergarten. I taught preschool. Like I am watching kids try to tie their shoes, right? And now I'm coaching young girls in the teen, community. Jerry and I go into schools and we do talks about these things. It is about these obstacles in life, whether it be trying to tie that shoe to get out the door because we didn't wear shoes in the classroom at preschool, right? And yes, I want my kiddo to get as much playtime outside, but if I continue to do it for them and remove the opportunity for growth, how are they going to learn to tie the shoe, right? And I'm using that as a very simplistic example that I think we've heard often, but just thinking about all that's going in that kiddo's mind and the frustration and the level of that. Yeah, somewhere in there, they may ask for help because they're 4 and they don't
A
know
great
yet.
skill.
Exactly. But asking for help, like Jerry said, is an amazing skill. So going from not knowing, and then maybe the teacher gets in there and is helping, and then that kiddo's getting a little more practice, a little more knowledge. And by the end of the week, that kid's probably going to be tying their shoe. If I jump in every single time as the parent or the teacher or the caregiver, we're not on that trajectory to learning, right? And we've now removed the opportunity for growth. We've also, like I said, had that child or that teen in that moment feel like, you don't know how to get it done. So I don't have the confidence in you. So instead, I'm going to do it. So thinking about school, I want to kind of just think of a couple different scenarios. So, thinking about as school's starting, right? We've got new concepts in math that our children are not going to yet understand, right? We have a writing assignment that feels overwhelming. We have a new classroom with new people, new routines, new structures, new teachers, right? These are all things that are going to happen in our new classrooms, in our new learning, right? Or maybe we are starting a new sport, or we're going into middle school and starting in the band or orchestra for the first time, right? That is not going to be immediate success, right? There's a lot of learning. And so
Mhm.
this little chart kind of shows us that flow between how do I get from this confused, I don't understand and I don't know yet, to that confidence of like, wow, I'm actually giving it a try, right? So thinking about the growth of our children, this confusion starts, right? So that I don't know how to do this yet. And we say yet because we're growth mindset people. So the kiddo's like, I don't know how to do this, right? Then comes the frustration because I don't know, right? So with the right supports, right? Then we're thinking about, I'm not going to remove this immediately, right? I'm not going to take the frustration away. I am going to watch my child in this moment show some effort while I am with them, while I am supporting them. Some kids, like some of our youth, maybe they don't actually want you next to them doing it. So when I say supporting them, maybe you're over cooking dinner and they are working still on their building or their math assignment, right? So you're close in proximity, but you are not breathing over their shoulder because that might also cause some extra frustration. So thinking about where your child is at. But then what starts happening, right? The effort is there. And then we start experiencing, we watch them experience small little pieces of growth in that moment, or maybe down the line, right? This may not all happen in one sitting. And as they grow in that learning, their confidence is going to become stronger. It's going to go from the I cannot to maybe I cannot yet, or I'm not there yet, but that still builds confidence. We don't need to get to the 100% I can totally do this to feel confident in those small incremental steps. So we can say things like, well, you don't know how to do it yet, but maybe I can help you and we can figure it out together, right? So that's a great way of saying, like, I'm here for you, but I'm not going to do it for you. I'm not going to remove it and take care of it. So again, our job is about making our children feel that they are capable while they feel that frustration, while they are showing that effort, they are gaining growth and they are gaining a self-confidence that's extremely important for them. We want our children to know that we believe in them and that we believe that they can give it a try, whatever it is at whatever age. So we see this little kiddo on the top here, right? And he's like super frustrated. This is like my preschoolers, like trying to build something and I don't know what to build and I can't do it and it keeps falling over. And then down below, we have the kiddo trying to do their math and they're just super frustrated. So thinking about these two scenarios, maybe where do your kiddos fit in kind of this span of ages where frustration is sitting with them right now or has in the past? Because during your school year, it's going to come up. And we want our kids to know that they can handle the hard things. Like, we can do hard things, right? How many times have we said it? We need to believe in our kids that we can allow them to show that too. All right. So here we are. This is that emotional resilience. So now we've got the kiddo who had another kid come over. They've kind of tried to problem solve this. Now they've got a friend trying to help build together, right? And then we've got the kiddo that's working on math. Maybe you've gone over and given that bit of support. Like, you can handle this. I'm here with you if you have questions. So emotional resilience is built as a child is working through that growth and creating that persistent mindset of like, I can try, right? It doesn't need to be the best all the time. It doesn't need to be 100%. They got it, all in one sitting. We need to think of this over time. It's like a ladder. We're taking these small steps. We need to celebrate the small steps and the effort. So looking back at the persistence it took, the confidence that it's going to build for them to feel that they can, and all of the problem solving, right? So this kiddo trying to build, they're asking a friend to help. This little guy doing his homework, he's like asking a parent to come and help because he's feeling frustrated and not really sure how to do it. I'm not going to give him the answers, but I might help go through the steps. Creating all of these wonderful new skills and growth, showing flexibility and showing patience, right? So when I'm coming in to help my kiddo, I'm not going to probably teach math the same way the teacher did because I don't really know that. And they're going to tell me that right away. Like, that's not how my teacher taught it. Well, we did math differently. Maybe you can tell me how your teacher, was teaching it. And then we can come together and try to solve this, right? So asking them questions, keeping ourselves patient, allowing them to breathe through, whatever their coping skills are to get through those frustrating points, showing that emotional resilience through that not knowing to knowing. And again, it's not like it's in one sitting. So remembering that these things take time and it's about the small movement. And it's important to see and to tell our kids, right? I notice how much, how frustrated you felt with that, but I really like the way that you gave this a try. Or I noticed how frustrated you were, and I saw that you gave yourself a break and had a snack. So noticing those things too is going to help build more of that emotional resilience and them to feel that confidence.
Yeah, and we're so used to acknowledging the product that they create, but what
Hmm.
we want them to be able to do on their own is the difficult things, like the effort, right? Like, wow, you put in a lot of hard work there, and it
Hmm.
stops there, right?
Hmm.
Doesn't matter what they produced. Obviously, there's a piece of that that ultimately becomes true because there's levels of productivity, but that's so important, right? That's awesome. Thank you, Marcel. The other
Yeah.
thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about is the idea of boredom. I mean, everybody can acknowledge we're in a generation of young people who are never not under constant stimulation, whether it be in social settings, but the current generation are the first to just grow up consistently being exposed to screen time and cell phones and other devices, and so boredom really has gotten lost. I'll tell you a story. This is actually a story that was told to us. Marcel and I were at the Evergreen Health Fair, and one of the staff members there and a colleague of ours was chatting with us, and we were talking about this kind of stuff, and she shared a story that it just warmed our hearts. So she lived somewhere rural, and so they had a little piece of property, and there was tons and tons of woods and stuff like that. And her young person, 5, 6 years old, was just having one of those days, like, what do I do? What do I do? Kind of being in that circumstance of boredom. And her mom was like, you know what? I would like you to go outside and collect acorns. And he's like, what? She's like, go collect acorns outside. We have so many trees. See how many you can get. Right. And off the girl went into the yard and started collecting acorns. And what occurred after that is the young person came back with like two gigantic Home Depot buckets full of acorns and said, Mom, you need to help me. We're making a squirrel restaurant. And they're like, what? It's like, acorns. We can charge them a quarter. And she's like, okay. And so the daughter ran, got everything she needed, and they put together a little squirrel restaurant, and it sat outside on their porch. They would put the acorns on it. There was a little cup, and squirrels would actually come and take the acorns, and one of the parents would put a quarter in, and the girl would just ran the restaurant for the rest of the summer. It was just such an amazing story about the power of having nothing for a period of time. Boredom is one of the most amazing circumstances that we can allow our young people to experience. Boredom and the benefits of boredom have been studied significantly. One is that when we slow down and we are not inundated by the external, all of a sudden the internal neurological, physiological responses we have access to in a different manner. And that is a circumstance that provides opportunities for creativity, right? I hate to say this because I'm starting to sound like one of those parents, because I am one of those parents, but we recall, if you're up in age like us, that our parents would just say, go outside in the yard and play. And when we got out there, we would have to start generating what we were going to do. And it lent itself to unbelievable games and stories in our head about pirates and all of these things that does not occur with our young people anymore, right? If they want to see pirates, they pull out their phone. If they want to create a moment, right, they start utilizing other avenues that are different than their own creativity. And it starts very, very young. I will challenge you to look around the next time you're at a supermarket. And I get it. My child was like, but the supermarket was an amazing opportunity to walk around and look at people and look at things. And it was like the free zoo, right? You can always go to the supermarket, jump in the cart. But again, if you walk through a supermarket nowadays, little people are in those carts and they have devices in front of them. They're not being exposed to all of this magic that's going on around them, and people and noises and sounds and just stuff. They're in a circumstance where everything is coming at them digitally. And so we certainly need to think about that. Schools are starting to change their policies with regard to laptops and phones so that we can get back to a place of interactions and connection and community. But that's an important part of that, is that in circumstances where we're not exposed to incoming input, our brain then starts to create and generate creative thoughts and ideas. And that's what companies out in the real world want, right? They don't want somebody with the, oh, you have a 4.0 grade point average. That's awesome. What can you do with that 4.0 grade point average, right? How can you use the education, the learning that you have, create something new, right? To change things, to be really at the top of that Bloom's taxonomy grid, right? So that you're taking what you've learned and doing something new with it rather than just regurgitating it because that's what you have access to. Boredom also builds emotional strength and emotional regulation capacity. Marcelle talked about that. But when we're in our own stuff and we're quiet, we then know and learn how to regulate ourselves, right? So we can be confident. And there's a gigantic difference between loneliness and being alone, right? Quiet time, the capacity to regulate internally, all of those things come from the opportunities that boredom or quiet time allows us. So every moment doesn't have to be filled with videos and a movie and the screens in the back of the car and stuff like that. They can be filled with opportunities to sit and be in yourself internally and then see what gets creative out of that, right? Cool opportunity. Also supports problem solving skills. When we're quiet, again, we have access to neurological capacities that we don't have when we're responding to external stimuli, right? There's a big difference between responding and reacting. And so when we're in circumstances where we are self-regulating and we have a moment, or we create those moments, or we're used to those moments, kind of going back to Marcelle's conversations about frustration tolerance, right? We can sit in that. What we're going to generate as a solution is going to be much more productive than whatever's rote for us, right? I describe it in my work, working with organizations that get stuck in that when they're just running at capacity all the time, is that there's a train track and they're used to being on the train track. So might as well just do that instead of slowing down and going, is there a different way I can go about this? Is there another set of tracks that might be more unique, but it's going to give me something in return that's more productive, that I can value, right? Doing what we're used to doing is easy. And that's what comes out in circumstances where I'm reacting. When I'm responding, I'm analyzing, I'm slowing down, and I have the capacity to create something different. And then one that we don't necessarily think about a whole lot, but in circumstances where young people are constantly being kind of barraged in their communities with incoming dopamine response signaling, right? Cell phones, apps on cell phones, they're all kind of designed in a manner that creates circumstances where they're repeated because it's pleasurable, right? You get a lot of likes, you get a lot of this, you get a lot of that, the games and stuff like that. And so what we're seeing in young people is that they're neurologically being bombarded with dopamine responses. Dopamine is that neurotransmitter that allows you to have pleasure and repeat activities. And it's obviously connected with not only process addictions, which is a behavior that gets repeated over and over, like gambling and the rewards from gambling, but also substance use disorders. And so researchers are starting to look at, okay, so what are we doing in terms of setting up the central nervous system for young people with regard to their use of devices on a consistent basis to kind of be primed for discomfort or um, maladaptive construction of responses. And that can be potentially dangerous for young people as we look ahead. And then some of our solutions, Marcelle will start talking um, about change-based mindset. So yeah, excited to hear about.
Unmute. There we go. All right. So yeah, to add from where Jerry was at with all of these great things that we're learning and the things that we want to try to, model and do as our children are growing. Another great opportunity for some ways to come in as a caretaker and parent whichever you are here, even classroom teachers, right? So I've talked about kind of all three of these, right? So saying no. Saying no is something that our kids are going to hear. So my teacher won't let me, as an example, my teacher will not let me use the computer in the classroom. So instead of coming in as the parent in that moment, like, I'm going to email the teacher. What we want to try to do is create this space where we can allow our child to feel validated that they're feeling disappointment in this moment, but also, what did your teacher offer you to do instead? Right? So validating that they feel that disappointment, but also finding out what it is that the teacher wanted them to do. And maybe, like Jerry was pointing to boredom, maybe the teacher is trying to get the student in that moment to figure out what to do, right? So that's also a skill that we may use as teachers in all levels. The next one, you've got this little girl waiting, when is it my turn? Right? Waiting can be very difficult. It can bring a lot of frustration. Maybe you're waiting for your turn on, with a toy. Maybe you're waiting for your teacher to grade that test or that essay, right? So again, waiting is something that in life we're going to have to do. So again, as the caretaker, what we want to do is validate. So waiting is really hard. What could you do while you're waiting? Or in those moments of wanting your older child maybe is trying to wait for that test to be graded, right? Okay, well, I understand that it's frustrating to wait, but your teacher also has, 250 tests to grade. So, maybe showing a little bit of that compassion for the fact that your teacher is quite busy. Again, you're acknowledging that there is a frustration, there's a feeling of some sort that's coming along with it, but then you're also not trying to fix it. You're lending often a question. Those questions can really help, and they get our children to think a little more deeply instead of being so reactive, right? So Jerry was talking about the difference between responding and reacting. And also, so that responsiveness is like thinking before acting, right? Instead of being super, reactive and getting all upset and getting super heightened emotions about something that, again, they don't really have any ability to change, right? The teacher has said what they've said, or the teacher has a lot of things to grade. We cannot change that, but we can validate that our child feels how they feel. So then this next one is about feeling frustration. So again, oftentimes we may hear our kids saying while they're in school, like, I can't do this. You may hear a kiddo say, like, I can't do this. When am I going to ever use this? This is so stupid, right? Like, I don't know. Some of us might have heard that. instead of coming in like, oh, it's not that hard, or like, just try harder, you're not even trying hard, right? That's not validating that they are feeling the way that they're feeling, right? So, yeah, this is really frustrating. Maybe let's slow down and take it apart, right? Like, let's take it piece by piece. So, what you're trying to do in this moment is help support your child through what we looked at before, right? Having that frustration and then getting through to that growth. And that might be persistence, that might come up with some problem solving. It comes up with being flexible, finding flexibility in a situation. It creates more confidence for them as they realize, like, oh, I actually can figure out these hard things, or actually, I guess I can wait for my teacher to grade my essay, you know? And again, building that frustration tolerance. Like, I can feel frustrated without giving up, or I can feel frustrated without having to, just remove that from my life. Like, it's okay that I feel that way. Jerry and I talk a lot about validating our children's emotions. And yes, not every behavior is okay. Not every, way that they're going to act, right? Their brains are still developing, and that's a whole nother thing. But, some of what you're going to see is very normal. They're going to have those meltdowns because they are 5 or because they are 13. Their brains are developing. Their nervous systems are not quite sure like how to deal with all of this. So our support in allowing some of this while also creating those boundaries is going to help them feel safe. So again, coming in and thinking, how do I help without fixing? So we don't want to fix all of that frustration. We really want to help them learn to move through frustration. Okay. All right. So, like we said, new school year, new teachers, new classrooms, new friendships, new expectations, new challenges, right? So, coming up with this sort of like shift in our own selves as the parents coming in, while we are going to hear some things from our children. I'm bad at this. I can't do this. I didn't do well on that, or I wasn't prepared for that, right? So, you may have your kiddo crying, right? Like, instead of saying, you're fine, we want to acknowledge, right? I see that you're really having a hard time. I understand that you're feeling frustrated, right? When we see our children being so hard on themselves, having that, I call it the inner critic voice. I'm not good at this. Everyone else here knows what they're doing. Why don't I know what I'm doing? I'm going to mess up. Nobody's going to want to be my friend, right? These are those inner voices that sometimes our kids have that they're not actually saying to us, but we need to kind of figure out as the parent, like, what's going on underneath that stuff, right? Why are they showing these big emotions? Why are they having this meltdown? Maybe they just want quiet when they come home. It's been a really long day. I just saw a video today. Actually, this little girl got in her car after her first day of school and told her mom how wonderful it was. And then her mom started asking her questions, and her mom was all hyped up. And the little girl said, "Can we just be quiet all the way home?" And the mom still wanted to ask more. And then the girl said again, "But can we just be quiet all the way home?" And she was dealing with, oh my goodness, I just had 6.5 hours of a very long day. I'm tired. And and then she asked her to turn the music on and she wanted her choice of music because it was, her car ride home. But what I loved about it is that this little girl was able to tell her mom, like, I need quiet right now. And sometimes they're going to be able to tell us that, and other times they're not. And so we need to be there to figure out how to support them in those moments. So those negative thoughts, they're going to have them. They're going to have those inner critic voices. We as adults still have that, right? Sometimes. If we know how to quiet that a bit, like, that's a great skill to have. And we can start teaching that now. But what we also want our kids to know is that those negative thoughts that they're having, that are telling their inner voices, telling themselves these things, like, they're not really facts, right? Those are things that we can help support them through by saying things like, hey, let's just slow down together and let's think about this, or I'm right here when you're ready to talk about it. So being able to let them know again that you validate that their feeling is what they're feeling, but also that you're there to support them through whatever it is. Going to school and not knowing where to sit at lunch, that's a huge thing for our kiddos, right? Even if you had people you sat with last year, lunch is one of those things, no matter what grade you're in. That is sometimes a pain point. So maybe you get ahead of that and you talk to your kiddos before school starts. Like, hey, let's think about that. Have you been thinking about that? I bet they're going to say yes. Like, I bet they're going to tell you that they've been having thoughts about what happens at recess, or if they're younger, what happens at lunch? Like, who am I going to be with? So ask them
Talkers.
questions. Yes, ask them questions, right? Questions are such a good way to get your kids talking. If you're putting in your comments, that's not how to get them talking. Ask them questions. Think about what might be going on underneath the surface when you're seeing these emotions, especially as all this new stuff is starting. And think about the questions that you can ask to get a little bit deeper. So this is kind of it here, right? Like instead of asking, how do I make this easier for my kiddo? Think about how do I support them through this feeling, right? So if the feeling is sadness, or the feeling is frustration, or the feeling is worry, right? What we want them to come out with are these, kind of what we see on the bottom here, right? I really wanted that, but I guess it's okay if not, right? So getting them to understand that there are boundaries still. Like we don't have to take those away to allow them to problem solve and be flexible, right? I don't really like this and I can handle it, right? I don't really like this math and I can handle it. I'm going to try my best, right? So it's okay that they have stronger feelings about things that maybe they just don't love about school. Like I tell my kids, my daughter struggled in chemistry. She's a junior. This coming year, she's a junior. She was a sophomore. So she's struggling in chemistry, but doing, really well in, other areas. And I just said, like, you do not have to like know how to do everything, and that's okay. So allowing them some of that care and acknowledgement from home is a really great way to make sure too that they're not feeling so much stress and worry about all of the pieces, as things are going to be brand new every year for them. They're on a transition time right now, and they're probably thinking about a lot of things that are coming up in the next week or so. And some of you on may already have started school. So these are great opportunities for you to start asking questions and supporting them through the feelings.
Indeed. Yeah, and to kind of summarize that overall ideal in terms of, responses as a clinician, I started to think about techniques we use in clinical engagements, one of which is motivational interviewing, which is just a really great way to be curious and to allow somebody to have the feelings that they are having and then walk with them through for them to find their own solutions. Because if we're, not the catalyst for that whole, then we're just generating all of the responses and the solutions, and they're not learning how to be successful. Because what we want at the end of the day is somebody who can function without us. I know, and that's horrible, right? Again, I
Oh,
just said my kid had his wisdom teeth taken out, and his mom sent me a text like 2 days ago. And in response to one of mine, I said, do you know he's getting his wisdom teeth out? And she's like, no. How did you tell? Like he just made the appointment because he's a young adult and he made the appointment and he was going to go to the appointment and like he followed all the things and has his insurance and like we created a functioning young person, but it's still hard. It's like, that's my child. They're going to get their
yes.
face ripped up, right?
Yes.
So thinking of some of these things, right? Um, I know when I was in the thick of that parenting, if my kid would say, I can't do this, the first thing that wants to come out of my mouth is, yes, you can. And it just discounts everything that they're feeling, right? And so how do we empathize with their circumstance, right? One of my favorite clinical little, verbiage jargon things is tell me a little bit more about, right? And it allows them this venue to explore and expand on it. And they'll tell you really what's underneath their discomfort. And that's really what we can then support. It's just such a great tool, right? I want to hear about it. I want to understand. So empathizing, right? That's got to be hard instead of solving it. Like, you can do this, you've got this, like, get your, it's like, no, right? Like, how can I just allow them to be in that moment? Then we're asking questions, then we're reframing that, right? That's the can't to can't yet. It's like, this is really hard. Yeah, you're right. That is really, really hard. What might be your next step in
Hmm.
being successful here, right?
Hmm.
So reframing it from a problem to a circumstance. And then that's empowering, right? Kids don't want to hear about the idea of growth mindset. Teachers don't want to hear it anymore. We did the same thing with resilience as we did with growth mindset, but it's so powerful, right? The idea
Hmm.
of, no, not yet. I'm not good at math. My kid, people used to tell my kid that all the time. I'm like, please stop saying that, right?
Hmm.
Because math just takes practice. It takes a lot of hard work, right? Nobody's, well, there are people who are good at math. like, boom, I'm great at math.
Right.
No, you have to work hard at math. Learning a language takes time. It takes effort, right? Learning an
Hmm.
instrument takes time. It takes effort. So yes, you're not supposed to be good at it immediately. We don't want to change and be their voice that just discounts everything that they're experiencing, because we want them to develop the resilience, the frustration tolerance, and the grit to get from there to the other side. And that's how we have really productive young adults in our community. It goes across all grades, into college, into adulthood. We're still learning as adults and how to be successful in that venue. It's awesome. So we're 2 minutes over, but we do have opportunities for questions. If anybody has any questions or thoughts or comments or stories about your kid, we love
You're
stories.
welcome to unmute or write it in the chat if you have anything that is sitting with you that you'd like to ask. We're here and we're not going to get off yet. So we are happy to answer any questions. Feel
Or just
free.
hang out.
Yeah.
We will
And
sit here
then,
quietly.
yeah. And just for a little bit of where you can find us as well while we're kind of sitting for questions. So, Jerry and I have a podcast called Parenting Upstream. You can find us on any platform that you listen
Wherever
to
you find your
podcasts.
podcasts.
Yes.
I
We
love
come
saying
out
that.
with one about each month, and that's because,
We have
it
jobs
is,
too.
it is, yes, we have other jobs too. Yes. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram. And our Facebook is, I always get this kind of messed up. So we've got our Facebook is Parenting Upstream Hub. And then our Instagram is Parenting Upstream underscore hub. We couldn't get them to same. I don't know why. Anyways, and then
And that's
parentingupstream, you can find
okay.
all of that. So if you go there, that's our website. You'll find all the links to our podcasts, our Facebook and Instagram, and also just what we do besides. We love to talk to our community. We love going in and being with our youth on site at schools and in different scenarios. We've done hotel speaking and fun events. We've done lots of things that are there just to support the youth around our community. So, yeah, it looks like we've
Awesome.
got something in the chat. Oh, okay.
David wanted to ask
Yeah,
a
I threw
question after the recording. So
yeah, I was gonna say I'm going to probably stop the recording here
Great.
so that people can ask their questions. But I appreciate everybody who's